We don't always know everything.
Sometimes that kind of like passiveness is almost more dangerous.
I didn't know about this stuff. This is amazing to learn.
So much wealth of knowledge there. How would you cast yourself in an ancient war? A Game Boy Indiana Jones, an arcade-style Sydney Fox, or a Nintendo DS Super Mario perhaps? Grab your hat, tools, and fill up your inventory, because today, we're exploring history. History in video games, that is. Since forever, history has had a front row seat in the video games industry. And video game history has to be fun, which means that truth and fact sometimes need to take a back seat to entertainment. That will be important later on in the show. History provides an inexhaustible reservoir of ideas, characters, landscapes, atmospheres, and adventures. Whether you're building badass historical monuments in Civilization, playing a Frank monarch in Crusader Kings 3, or Kratos in God of War, taking part in the fall of Saigon in Battlefield Vietnam, or reliving the Inquisition in A Plague Tale: Innocence. When players get sucked up into history games, they turn into archaeologists, piecing back together real or imagined histories and living through the consequences. Sometimes players can even influence the course of history, and that's not something you can do in your college history course. Okay, obviously there's going to be some divide between textbooks and video games, but does that mean that video games get to misrepresent things entirely, all whilst claiming historical accuracy? I don't think so. Historical errors do sometimes creep into games.
Huh? Whose footprints are these?
Often because of the needs of narratives or ideology or marketing. Gaming audiences are global audiences. And games have to reach across all cultures. But are they actually doing that? From my personal perspective, I grew up playing games that really focused on European history more than any other cultural history. And that left some of us feeling left out. There were dragons back in the day, but no people of color. However, the video game is not the enemy of history. Actually, far from it. In fact, historians have been increasingly working alongside publishers and developers to create more realism. Some studios even prize truth above gameplay, such as Kingdom Come: Deliverance. And others will actually try and teach you history. Yes, I'm looking at you Discovery Tour mode in Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Valiant Hearts: The Great War. I've even heard of teachers using video games in history lessons. That's definitely cheating. Here are some big questions to ponder. Is it good or bad to walk all over history? Is it better to play in the past or play with the past? And surely history changes depending on who's telling it. The fact remains that video games are cultural and creative entities and not manuals to tell the absolute truth of what happened in the past. Hey, welcome to Talk, and joining me to discuss history in video games are Jack Lusted, game director at Creative Assembly and director of the Total War Saga Thrones of Britannia. We also have writer, let's player and Twitch streamer Hannah Rutherford, aka Lomadia, and Thierry Nöel, historian, gamer and inspirational content advisor at Ubisoft. Thank you for joining me today. So Thierry, what is an inspirational content advisor and what does your team do?
Oh, it's a very nice job title.
Yeah,
for sure.
Definitely.
In fact, I'm part of the Ubisoft research unit, and we're a bunch of historians, geographers, sociologists, cultural experts, and we're in charge of collecting all the information to build our worlds and to transmit it to our creative teams, so that they can build the most immersive and credible, believable world. The team has been involved in most Assassin's Creed game. I personally took care of the Valhalla, the last one, and the expansions. And we're already working with the next ones.
Amazing. Is that common within the industry to have those kind of units within a game studio?
I think not. I think it's quite exceptional to have a full-time research unit, but I think it's something that will be developing in many other companies too, because it's really, there's such a demand when you try to reconstruct a world with all detailed cultural aspects, historical aspects, geography, etc., that you really need a full-time person researching for the teams.
Yeah, because you can tell when you play the Assassin's Creed game that there's been a lot of detail put into some of, when I was playing Valhalla recently, you just notice some of the small details that I think speak to your unit, because it's just so amazing to see that, and you learn a lot from those games. So to everyone, has history always been a subject in your life, as something of interest?
Yeah, so my dad was interested in local history when I was growing up, so I sort of got into history from that. And like I think a lot of English kids as well, I read the horrible history books.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
Got me into it and like, ooh, rotten Romans, yes please. And then throughout school I really liked history, and then I got into gaming because of my love of history, because I played Total War back when the original Medieval and Rome came out. And then I got to work on the games and keep on researching and looking at history. It's really quite fun.
And so you're the person doing most of the research on the games, or are you working in a team as well?
Yeah, it varies from game to game. So on the games I lead, I do a lot of the research. We also get external historians in where we need to. So recently we did Total War Three Kingdoms, our first game set in ancient China. So there we got the absolute expert in to make sure we were doing the details right. Because, you know, we're a studio based in the UK, there are limits to what you can research in English, so it's you need to get the experts in at time.
100%. And you have, Hannah, like what's been going on with history in your side?
Actively opted out of GCSE history because I hated
Likewise.
it. I'm like the exact opposite of you in that gaming got me into various bits of history. I quite liked like myths and legends as a kid, so Sinbad, Greek stuff, all of that. But it wasn't until I started playing a lot more games that were set in different eras that I was interested, or having to look, because I was producing Let's Plays, I was having to provide additional context. So like the golden age of piracy and Black Flag, things like that, where I was like, I need to go and actually find out who these people are so that I can explain it a bit more to the audience. So it's really through games that I've got interested in history, and I've learnt more through games.
Yeah, same. I think I'm playing Ghost of Tsushima right now, and I've learned so much more about the samurai, the kind of cultural and societal aspects of feudal Japan back in the day, and the invasion of the Mongols. Like, I learned from that game so much. It's been really, really interesting to me, and I think games are a really great medium to educate. However, is it always a case of thinking about what the studio wants or what the audience wants? So where's that line drawn?
So it's interesting to try and balance that, because you've got the periods that we want to make ourselves, right?
Yeah.
'Cause all of us got into Total War because we love the series, and now we've got not just the history ones but the fantasy ones. And it's always like, here's the setting I want to make. So you make the argument for it, and then with that you've got the balance of, okay, are we trying to portray the true historical version, or are you trying to buy into more of the myths around the period? So like Three Kingdoms again, the novel, The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, has been read by hundreds of millions of people in China and other nations, right? You can't do that period without referencing that novel. Whereas something like the Roman era, you are basing it on the history, right? And on the writings from that period, because that's what people know. And nowadays, more and more, the fans know a lot about the history as well, right? There's so much information available online that you can't just go, we know what's right and you know what's wrong. You're working with a much more informed player base.
Is that becoming increasing because of the internet, I guess, and social media and all that communication that's happening online, that you're now realizing that, oh, these people know what they're talking about, we have to...
Yeah, and it's also just the amount of resources available. Like, there's academic papers that are available online for free. There's, for a very niche British thing, there's a couple of Scotland and Wales both have websites that list all their historical monuments, all the dig information for those sites. Here's the layouts of them. You can go and find out anything you want. And it's just there on the internet. Like, that's a big challenge when you're doing something. You've got to show you've done the work to
100%.
represent the era. Because, like, and also you've got the challenges of how much can we replicate within the time and effort we've got. So you've got to go, where do we spend it? Where do we go, okay, we haven't quite done this.
So in what historical period would you have loved to live in?
In my case, I would love to think that I would have lived in the ancient Rome or something like this. Yes. Yeah,
ancient Rome. And you, Hannah?
It is difficult because it's like, again, the golden age of piracy, but also piracy, the Seven Seas, death, all of that.
Let's say you can come back.
Yeah,
to
like
normal time.
You're not
stuck there. You're coming back.
I don't know, I quite like to go back. I say this to chat every now and then. I'd love to be able to go back to places like Egypt and go, okay, what actually, like, we don't know when the pyramids were really built. Like, it's all a bit of a, like...
Skeptical.
We know that some stuff was around before other stuff, but we don't know how it happened. There are so many different theories in terms of, like, a load of people made it and all of that. And it would be great, I think, to just be able to go back and go, oh, I didn't know it was that. Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. Like, solve all the people making up all the conspiracies about aliens and just go, no, look, lads.
I was waiting for you to reference the aliens, but you know.
Aliens. So I think something like that would be really cool, to be able to go back to the Indus Valley tribes that we just don't know anything about.
You've stolen my answer.
Oh, sorry, Jack.
Well then, in that case,
Go on, Jack. Yeah, go on, give us your
And
answer.
this is just to visit, right? I like healthcare, I like the internet, I'm not going to stay in the past. But like the Indus Valley, where you've got these huge cities with sewer systems and that, and we have no written records. It's just going, what was it like?
Do you think that's so odd? It's just
where did they go?
Yeah.
Same with the Amazon rainforest. Like, we're finding all these structures that mean that this was like a mega city.
There were people there,
We've dramatically confused the size because of, I guess, the Spanish and no one taking any numbers in terms of population size. Like, what actually happened? So yeah.
You have these tribes that are all in this oral tradition, and all the writing about them is from their enemies. Like
Yes.
even things like the ancient era, the Roman era, the writing about the Celts and the Germans. It's all from their enemies. Like it's
They're
like
all
what is-
pagans, aren't they? Like,
They're all pagan. So when you create these games, do you take that into consideration that you may be writing from the enemy's perspective when you're actually trying to reflect these people?
Yeah, you really have to balance that sort of. Or you've got someone like, again, the Roman era. You've got someone like Tacitus writing about the Germans, and you go, okay, this is this guy's view. He's talking about great victories. What does the finds we have tell us? What does earlier civilizations tell us that we can try and compare to? So you build a more well-rounded picture of them. And it's tough because you are having to guess at times because they have no voice of their own. You are trying to build a voice for them.
But I think that's an opportunity of video games to build a multi-vision, a multi-view, to try to identify. We have time, we have big worlds. So we can identify each point of view, including stereotypes, including later interpretation, and trying to identify all of them and to use them different ways, and always trying normally to give a balanced view of the period.
So as game studios, is it difficult to then please your audiences, knowing that some of your audience may be descendant from the people that you're representing? And if it comes from one perspective, how do you deal with the critique? How do you internalize it? Do you take that back to the drawing board? How do you deal with those kinds of things? So for instance, with Origins, I know there was a lot of discussion around Origins because of the representation of Egyptians back in the day. How do you deal with the critique of those games?
I think we always take care of of the comments, and even the critiques of people, and we're trying to make it better for the next one. Right? It's always important to see what are the reactions. But I think really, I don't know, the policy is normally we really try to take care, to be respectful, to identify every aspect we could have missed. As I say, to have multiple point of views, and to, as you said, to go and see experts. We can be historians. We know how to manage and understand history or cultural aspect. But it's always good to see experts, to see people from the culture you're trying to represent, and to check with them what should be done or not, what could be done. And so it's important. I think. Nowadays, in the industry, most people try to really take care and to be respectful as much as possible. And with the limit that there's always a part of reconstruction. We don't always know everything. So that's also a part of, we try to imagine how it was, because we don't always know how it was.
So where do you draw the line between imagination and history? Because if you are filling in gaps, do you I know because I play your games, but do you tell your viewers in terms of, this is something that we've created from our imagination based on the facts available to us? Is that a disclaimer that you tell your audience, and do your audience understand that most of the time?
I'm always amazed to see our players commenting this point, this other point, and often explaining, yes, but they surely didn't know, or there's no information about it, so they had to do something. They had to imagine something based on what was existing. For example, we had no seal. There is no seal of remaining seal of Alfred the Great, England. So we used a coin of Alfred the Great to make the seal. And in the trailer, and people commented, "Oh, they used the coin because they had no seal." Yeah.
Okay. And Hannah, from the player's point of view, what excites you the most when you're playing historical games? What brings you to that place of, oh, I really love this game, they've really done it well? What do their studios do?
I think it is about taking things into consideration. It's about consulting. Like my community are really international, so it means a lot when even there's a representation of like First Nations, like is a lot to them. And potentially we'll pause the game and go and talk about it to give more context to people who don't understand. So, but I play a range of stuff. So it can be like super, we've done all the research, or it can be like fantasy, history, Tomb Raider, Uncharted sort of times, where it's like, there's a culture in here, but you've got a Greek Parthenon in Rome, or whichever way around it is. So I think it's about sort of just identifying the games that are like, yeah, perfect, this is pretty much, they've done the best they can, and communicating that. I love everything in terms of like having adventures in magical, mystical worlds. So that extends out to historical settings. Like Tomb Raider was a big game for me as a kid. So it kind of makes sense that as I've grown older and I've been given more games that have those worlds that are expanded and they're expanded well, that I've kind of fallen into the historical part of it accidentally, if that makes sense. I also Prince of Persia and Assassin's Creed. Like the movement from Prince of Persia, which is high fantasy levels of like sand monsters, through to, you know, Ezio, moving all the way through. Like it's kind of something that has definitely grown with me.
And why do you think historical games, and this is to everyone, why do you think they're so popular?
I think it's escapism, really, isn't it?
Same for you?
Partially.
It's the escapism, it's the amount you've heard of these periods, right? How much you learn about the history. Like the Romans are perennial favourites of people because you learn about the Roman invasion of Britain here, and you hear about the Great Empire, and they're referenced, and so many people try to ape that empire later. It's that, what was that like? What was it like to be in that period? And it's also the sort of giddiness in games of going back and seeing some of this stuff in real life, like in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Like two of my favourite moments are the moment you first see Athens, you're running around the corner and then just the city in front of you, and you're just like, oh, there's the Parthenon, and oh, this is really nice. It's just because it's the moments, it's the things you know, and it's amazing that games can do that and bring to life those things you know. But also at the same time, there's the period which you don't know well, and when a game portrays them fantastically, you then go, wow, I didn't know about this stuff. This is amazing to learn.
And you mentioned earlier, we were talking earlier, about people taking, I guess, aspects of the game and making it into their own to kind of reenact historical moments. Talk to us about, was it Time Commanders you were mentioning earlier?
Time Commanders, yes. We did a couple of series with the BBC on this back when the first Rome Total War came out, and it was a chance for, like, you know, no game had done battles in that scale, in that detail before. So it was like, here's some ordinary people, play the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, be a commander, see what it's like and experience it. And we know a lot of schools use our games as well to show off these battles, because it's that level of detail you can't get, like reading about a battle and seeing it in actual 3D. And then allowing people to put in control and going, could you do better? How would you play this out? It's that level of interaction that you just don't get anywhere else.
That's hilarious though. Like, can you imagine little kids say, I will do it. The next thing you know, they're dead. In the game, not in the game. So you joined Total War because you wanted to create these games, and I guess now you're there. What other periods, and this is to everyone as well, what other periods would you like to see created in game?
I would love to see something happening in Latin America, Wars of Independence, Mexican Revolution.
Yes.
I mean, or pre-Columbian period, so something like this. I would love to make a game.
Likewise.
Or to play a game in that period.
Yeah, likewise. I think Mesoamerica and just the natives and the First Nation people in South America. Fascinating, so much wealth of knowledge there, and that's my personal perspective, is like I didn't see a lot of diversity in historical games growing up. It was very much focused on a European perspective, Greek, Norse, Roman, Viking, Celtic. The fact that I can name them is evident that they were always there, but we don't get to see things like the Songhai Empire in Africa, or the Malian Empire, or the fact when Ethiopia resisted colonization. Like, there's so much story that I would love to see as a consumer that sometimes is missed out in games, and I just really wish that some games would create these environments that would have a little bit more, you know, to the level of research that you do in these games, exposing games to all cultures as opposed to just one geographic location. But sorry, Jack, I interrupted. Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I've got a boring British answer, which is I love one about the English Civil War because it's such a fundamental period of history for us. But then otherwise, like Indian history, you don't get games about that much.
No, all we get is the colonial part.
Yeah,
It's like, we don't want that bit. We want like...
Or you just get the myths and legends, but not the actual history.
Yeah, not the
inspired
actual
it.
historical. Yeah, 100%. Is there any specific area or specific...
Well, because like for Rome 2, we researched a lot about sort of the Greco-Bactrians who were on the edge of India, and they went into India as well. And there's thoughts that like the Buddhist statues were inspired by Greek sculpture and stuff. So there's real fascinating melting pot of cultures going on there. Because like we're starting to see games more and more about like Japan and China as well. But there's still so much more to go. Like there's any period of history you could set an interesting game in, and I want to see all of them.
Do you think all historical periods offer something to play with, or is it a bit too far-fetched to think that?
I think you can make anything, right? So there's some periods where you have to make up more. So we recently done Total Saga Troy, which is based on the Iliad, because you go back to actual time period of the Trojan Wars from actual history. There's nothing written, there's barely anything there. And people expect something that's like the Iliad, so you have to sort of blend together the finds you know about, like the armour, the cities, with the story to present something that draws people in. Like, we talked about the Indus Valley civilization earlier. I'd love a game set in that. You'd be making most of it up, but it would be fascinating to try and depict what we know about them. I think there's certainly caution when you get to more recent time periods, just because of people may be alive who are involved in some of these conflicts. Like, you could make a game about the Northern Ireland Troubles. Would you want to?
Earn a couple of slaps?
But I think, as you say, any period could be used, but differently with its own challenges. From what you say, the absence of sources, or sometimes too sensitive issues. But it's just a question of handling it with. We're talking about respect, about diversity, and to be open-minded and do it the right way. But we should not avoid to treat it.
Hannah, what do you think? What period would you like to see, and do you think every period of history can offer something to play?
I would love to have stuff in like Persia, like because we've had things like Assassin's Creed sort of teased at Persian stuff. So I'd like to have that, Indus Valley, all of that sort of area, Asia, like basically not Western stuff. Mesoamerica, more of Africa as well. Like that, we have very little to do with in terms of gaming that represents African history. Like literally, I can only think off the top of my head of Assassin's Creed Origins, which is specifically Egypt, which is arguably an entity in itself.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on this, Jack, about kind of filling in the gaps. When does filling in the gaps become misrepresentation in games?
So when you're portraying periods where you don't have much, it's very interesting. Like, people have expectations about all periods, right? No matter how well known or not they are. You have to think about, what is that stereotype telling you? Is it an easy shorthand to bring you into a setting and then it's useful and it's not doing harm? Or is it a thing that's come down through not great passing down? Like, maybe it's some slightly racist stuff from the Victorian era that you're trying to build on, and you're like, actually, what is the truth? And like, as much as possible, you have to go back to the sources. The original, whether they're written or archaeological stuff, and then build from there. And it's about imagining a truth for that period that is respectful, right? And it's a problem a lot of games have, right? Because I make war games. They focus on men mostly fighting conflicts. There's a lot of other stuff going on in this period, so it's how you bring through those aspects. Like, there's so much of history that could be made for war games, and there's so much history that can be made for any other kind of game.
You mentioned some of the, I guess, the tools that you use to immerse players, like cliches and stereotypes and symbols. Why are they so easy to kind of immerse players? Why is that? And why do players already have ideas? Do you know where they get these ideas from?
Well, nowadays, I'm going to talk about Throne to Britannia, which was in the Viking Age, right? There's a lot of TV series out there focusing on the Vikings. People learn a lot about it at schools. There's a lot of ideas people have built up. Like, even if they don't have much knowledge, they'll have a little bit in the back of the head of, oh, there was lots of pillaging and raiding and churches got destroyed stuff. And
the usual.
Yeah, the usual stuff. It's Vikings. So you have to do enough there, right? So on Thrones, I think that's a game where we probably went too far into history. Like, there wasn't enough of what people recognise there to draw people in. Because we get a lot of comments about it, which is like, oh, why aren't the Vikings really pagan? Why aren't they going around destroying all the churches? Answer is, they converted pretty quickly. Like after the war ends between Alfred the Great and the Vikings, his main opponent converts to Christianity, becomes a king of a kingdom.
Is he getting baptized? I can't let him out of my sight for a minute.
Cool. But players want that expectation fulfilled, and you've got to get that balance right of looking at how people understand these settings, putting enough of that in to draw them in to then tell them a different story or a different angle on this period.
What historical figures would you all like to play?
Well, the question for me is also, do I want to be a woman in the past?
This is it.
Yeah, I guess anonymous and maybe even as a guy.
Okay.
Just, to not have to deal with the additional hassle.
And that's one thing as well, like games sometimes negate those aspects when you choose a female character in a certain period, and it's like, well, is this realistic? But then again, do you want to go into a game to relive those aspects that some of them still exist today?
Well, yeah, exactly.
It is what it is. In terms of your favourite historical games, which one do you think has caused the most suffering to loyal gamers?
The one that's stuck in my head is Shadow of the Tomb Raider,
Right.
which did quite a lot of public noise about representing Maya, Aztec, Inca, and then kind of merged all three in the end product. I don't think they intentionally meant to do it, but the end result was this kind of
You all the same.
vague, like, here are some people who live in a town in the forest, but there's no real, partially because I guess we don't necessarily know the differences, other than the Aztecs sacrificed people, and that's all we got going. There was an intention, and then it maybe was lost somewhere along the way to make space for the fictional element. Sometimes that kind of passiveness is almost more dangerous than straightforward, like this is clearly incorrect, because it's not, you read into it and you're like, oh, I trust that this is accurate. And then you forget that actually this is a white woman gallivanting around in the rainforest, in tombs, using traps that in no way could still exist in this day.
Okay, time has come to wrap up the show with a little quiz. The principle is simple. I'm going to talk to you about the setting of a game and give you 4 choices of dates, and you have to tell me when it was set. First question, in what year does the game Versailles 1685 take place? A, in 1685, B, in 1686, C, in 1687, or D, none of these dates. This is a trick question.
1685.
Yeah, I would go with 16.
Okay, you're right. Well done.
Phew.
Next question.
Not a trap.
In what period of history does Age of Empires 2 take place? A, Antiquity, B, the Middle Ages, C, Renaissance, or D, during Donald Trump's presidency?
Gonna have to go for B there, the Middle Ages.
Oh, I was about to say antiquity, but let's say antiquity.
B?
The Middle Ages?
Yeah.
You're wrong, I'm sorry, Thierry. It's the Middle Ages, well done. Next question. The first 3 Call of Duty games took place during a famous war. Which one? A, the Cold War, B, the First World War, C, the Second World War, or D, the Sausage Wars of 2021?
It's so tempting to say D, but World War II.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, well done, everyone. You know your history more than me. Next question. Okay, so you might know this one. Assassin's Creed 2 was staged in a key period of Italian history. Which one? A, ancient Rome, B, the Italian Revolution, C, Berlusconi's reign, or D, the invention of pizza?
Italian Revolution.
Renaissance, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well done. Just double checking you guys know your stuff, especially you, Thierry. All right, next question. Crusader Kings takes place in medieval Europe between the Norman conquest of England and the fall of Constantinople, which was A, between 476 and 622, B, between 622 and 1066, C, between 1066 and 1453, or D, between 1453 and 1492?
C.
C.
Oh, I was going to say D, but now I want to say C.
So you C. Everyone C?
Yes.
Well done. You really know your stuff, of course. The game American Conquest tells the story of the United States from the discovery of the New World to the Treaty of Versailles, which sealed American independence. When was this treaty? A, in 1776, B, in 1783, C, in 1789, or D, none. There was no Treaty of Versailles after the First World War in 1919.
D.
1783, which is...
Hannah's always just looking very like,
B. Let's just go with B.
B's correct. Well done. Sorry, Jack.
I thought it
It's
was the treaty.
1783. Next
That
question.
was a tough one.
It was a tough one, yeah. I'm not going to lie, I couldn't answer any of these, so you're all
I'm
good.
just copying their answers.
Yeah. We're in the same boat right here. We're in the same boat, but just, same letters. Red Dead Redemption takes place at the end of the conquest of the West in a Twilight era Western. When was this exactly? A, in 1911, B, in 1905, C, in 1930, or D, in 2016? Every time Thierry looks at me, I know he knows the answer.
This is the second one, right?
This is Red Dead Redemption 1, the first one.
Oh,
1911.
Yeah.
1911.
Okay, well done. Everyone knows that. I'm the only one who doesn't. Okay. Next question. Moving on to Red Dead Redemption 2. It takes place several years before the first episode. How long exactly? A, 9 years before, B, 10 years before, C, 11 years before, or D, 12 years before?
B.
9 years.
Oh, God.
So A, B,
C.
C. Answer's D. Sorry guys. Final question, and this will test one of your brand loyalties. During which crucial period of feudal Japan does the Shogun Total War game take place? A, the Namboku period, B, the Onin period, C, the Sengoku period, or D, the Azuchi period?
Sengoku period.
Yes.
That sounds fine.
Well done, and to give you the results, Hannah got the least questions wrong.
That's not all right.
Take that as an offence if you want to.
Well, be back to the history books later.
Definitely.
Just copy the answers. Apparently that works. Oh, my God.
Thank you all for joining me. It's been a really interesting conversation. And now it's time for top 5. Who hasn't dreamed of living in another time? I'd give my right arm to go back to being 10 years old. No responsibility except to my Pokemon. Video games are very effective at making those dreams come true. Here's the proof of the top 5 history games that make 2021 seem very dull indeed. Cry Primal is for hardcore survivalists. It plunges you into 10,000 BC in the middle of prehistory and teaches you to hunt mammoths and to tame saber-toothed tigers and to manage a tribe. Back then we knew how to do it. It's not like today where I'm not even able to lift my eyes from my screen. A bit like me with this video game in fact. There was something about feudal Japan, the code of honor, the fights, and the little naps in the shade of a sakura. One game of Ghost of Tsushima and we would give anything to change our life and exchange our iPhone for a katana. And after all, what else does our era have to offer? Consoles and video games? Yeah, okay, it's true. In Anno 1800, you can build a city by yourself in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. It's enough to make you feel like a Gustav Eiffel crossed with George Eugene Haussmann. While in my real life, I'm not even able to change a light bulb and install a shower curtain. Not long ago in the Wild West, drinking bourbon, firing rifles and hunting on horseback were considered cool. These days you'd have to be a true cowboy to think that. Now all the really cool people work in Silicon Valley and are generally the opposite of cowboys. The Western age was so much more straightforward. GTA Vice City knows style. Miami in the 80s was the business. You could rock crazy hairstyles, floral shirts, neon pink capri pants, and still look like an average business person. That's the dream.